I never saw it coming. My name is Isabella Hawthorne, and for the last 5 years I had been the girlfriend of Ethan Blake, the man I thought I was going to marry. We were the perfect couple, the kind of love story people whispered about with envy. Ethan was tall, dark, and effortlessly charming, with the kind of smile that could disarm even the coldest heart. He used to tell me I was his world, that there was no one else but me. And I believed him. That was my first mistake. My younger sister, Sophia, was everything I wasn't. Blonde, delicate, with big blue eyes and a soft voice that made men feel like they were protecting something fragile. But Sophia wasn't fragile, she was dangerous. And I was stupid enough to trust her. I introduced her to Ethan. I thought nothing of it at first. Why would I? He was my sister. Ethan was mine. That bond was unbreakable. Or so I thought. Started with the small things. Sophia began coming over more often. Sitting too close to Ethan on the couch. Laughing a little too hard at his jokes. But I brushed it off because Ethan was loyal. Ethan was mine. Then he started acting strange. He'd come home late from work, smelling of perfume that wasn't mine. He became distant, distracted. When I tried to kiss him, he'd pull away, muttering something about being tired. My gut told me something was wrong, but I ignored it because I couldn't handle the idea of losing him. The night of the engagement party was supposed to be perfect. Ethan had told me he had a big announcement, and I was sure he was going to propose. I spent hours getting ready, choosing a black silk dress that hugged my curves perfectly. I wanted to be unforgettable. I wanted to be his forever. I arrived at the party feeling like a queen. My parents were there, smiling at me with pride. Sophia was there too, wearing an innocent white dress. Of course. She looked up at me with that soft smile that made everyone adore her. I scanned the room for Ethan, and then I saw him. Down on one knee. In front of Sophia. My heart stopped. My breath caught painfully in my throat as his voice carried through the room. Sophia, will you marry me? For a second the world tilted. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. But then Sophia's trembling voice said, yes. The room erupted in applause. My mother cried and my father clapped Ethan on the back like he had just won the lottery. And Sophia, my baby sister, slid her hand into Ethan's as he slipped a diamond ring onto her finger. My ring. I couldn't breathe. I stumbled back, clutching the edge of a table as my vision blurred. Ethan's eyes met mine over Sophia's shoulder. He didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. I turned and walked out of the party without a word. My chest felt tight. My skin burned with the humiliation of it all. I heard Sophia calling after me, but I didn't stop. My heels clicked on the pavement as I rushed outside, gasping for air. The betrayal burned through my veins like acid. Sophia, my sister, Ethan, my love. Together. And they had let me find out this way, in front of everyone. I sat in my car, hands trembling, tears streaming down my face. I stared at the diamond ring on Sophia's hand, replaying the moment over and over. My sister had stolen my future, my love, my life. And I was going to make them both pay. Because revenge is best served cold. I didn't cry after that night. The pain didn't come in the form of tears. It settled into something colder. Sharper. A numbness that ran so deep I could almost hear it humming under my skin. For the first few days after the engagement party, I stayed in bed, replaying the betrayal over and over in my mind. Ethan down on one knee. Sophia whispering yes through trembling lips. The crowd cheering as if they hadn't just witnessed the most vicious backstab in human history. But the hurt didn't consume me. Transformed me. Grief has a way of sharpening into rage if you sit with it long enough. And rage has a way of becoming clarity. By the 5th day I sat upright in bed, opened my laptop and started planning. Ethan and Sophia had taken everything from me. My love. My trust. My future. They had paraded their betrayal in front of the world without shame, expecting me to quietly disappear. To accept it. To smile at the wedding and hand Sophia my bouquet like some pathetic runner-up. They thought I was weak. They were about to find out how wrong they were. The first step to revenge wasn't personal, it was financial. Ethan's entire identity was tied to his family's business, Blake Industries. His father had spent decades building the company into a financial juggernaut. Ethan was the heir apparent, destined to take over when his father retired. The whole city expected it. And I was going to make sure Ethan never touched that throne. I spent the next week gathering every bit of dirt I could find on Blake Industries. It wasn't hard. Ethan had trusted me with everything when we were together. He'd tell me about shady business deals after too many glasses of scotch. He'd laugh about insider trading and manipulation of stock prices, thinking I wouldn't understand. But I had remembered every word. And now those words were going to burn him to the ground. I compiled a dossier so damaging it would make the SEC look like amateurs. Insider trading. Bribes to government officials. Offshore accounts stuffed with illegal funds. And then there were the documents Ethan had forged to inflate Blake Industries' stock value. Documents that could land him in federal prison if they ever saw the light of day. I needed a weapon to deliver the final blow. And that's when I thought of Julian Blackwood. Julian wasn't just Ethan's biggest competitor. He was his sworn enemy. The Blake and Blackwood families had been at war for years. Ethan had always hated Julian, calling him ruthless, dangerous, and immoral. Exactly the kind of man I needed. Julian's assistant returned my call within 20 minutes of hearing my name. That same evening, I met Julian at an exclusive rooftop bar overlooking the city. He was tall, dark-haired, with the kind of quiet intensity that made you feel like you were being hunted. He didn't smile much, but when he did you could almost feel the temperature drop. "Miss Hawthorne," he said, standing as I approached. "I hear you have a proposition." I slid a black folder across the table. "I have enough dirt on Blake Industries to burn it to the ground." Julian opened the folder and started flipping through the pages. His mouth curled at the edges. "Interesting." "Not just interesting," I said. "Actionable. Illegal." He looked up at me, his dark eyes sharp. "And what exactly do you want in exchange for this?" "I want Ethan ruined. Publicly. Financially. I want his name dragged through the mud. I want his career to be unfixable." I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "And I want him to know that I'm the one who did it." Julian's eyes glinted. "You're dangerous, Isabella." "I'm motivated." He studied me for a long moment, then closed the folder. "Consider it done." Julian's people were fast. Within days, whispers about Blake Industries' financial mismanagement started circulating in the business world. Stock values dropped. Investors began backing out. The media got their hands on the documents. Leaks about corruption and insider trading filled the front pages of every financial newspaper. Ethan's father was forced to hold a press conference to address the scandal, but it wasn't enough to stop the collapse. Blake Industries lost millions overnight. Julian made sure that his company, Blackwood Holdings, was in prime position to take advantage of the chaos. He started buying up Blake Industries stock at bargain prices, effectively staging a hostile takeover. And Ethan? He was drowning. His father blamed him for the scandal, publicly stripping him of his position in the company. Overnight, Ethan went from heir to disgrace. But it still wasn't enough. Sophia was next. My dear, sweet sister, the delicate flower who had no problem crushing me beneath her perfect little heel. She had smiled in my face, stolen my future, and stood at that engagement party with a diamond ring that belonged to me. She needed to bleed. Sophia worked for one of the most prestigious PR firms in the city. Her reputation was her currency. She lived off the attention of others. If I could tarnish that, she'd crumble. I started small, feeding whispers to the gossip columns about Sophia's wild behavior. Photos of her at late-night clubs, drinking too much. Suggestive rumors about inappropriate behavior with clients. I contacted a well-known social media influencer and paid her to post anonymous tips about Sophia's unethical work habits. The press picked it up quickly. Soon Sophia was the target of a media storm. Her firm suspended her pending an internal investigation. The clients she worked with began quietly cutting ties. But I wasn't done. Sophia had always been insecure about her looks. The perfect blonde hair, the delicate bone structure, they were her shields against the world. I knew exactly how to rip them away. I arranged for a set of photos to leak, untouched high-resolution paparazzi shots of Sophia looking tired, bloated, her makeup smudged after a night of drinking. The tabloids tore her apart. Comments flooded social media. What happened to her? She's aging terribly. Drunk again? Embarrassing. The next time I saw Sophia, she was sitting at a cafe with Ethan. She looked pale, her hands shaking as she scrolled through the comments on her phone. Ethan looked distracted, agitated. He wasn't comforting her. He was angry, embarrassed. And that's when I saw the cracks forming. Julian arranged the final blow. Blake Industries was holding a desperate fundraiser to save face. Sophia was hosting the event, trying to restore some of her public image. Ethan would be attending, forced to put on a brave face despite the scandal. I showed up with Julian. I wore a sleek black dress, the same one I had been wearing the night Ethan proposed to Sophia. My hair was swept up, red lips curled in a dangerous smile. Sophia's eyes widened when she saw me, but Ethan's reaction was better. His gaze darkened. His jaw tightened. His hands curled into fists. Julian leaned close to me and whispered in my ear, loud enough for Ethan to hear, "You look exquisite tonight." Ethan stalked toward us, his eyes blazing. "You need to leave," he growled at me. I smiled sweetly. "I'm here as Julian's date." Sophia approached, looking fragile and wide-eyed. "Isabella, can we talk?" "Not tonight." I brushed past her. That's when Julian handed a folder to a waiting reporter, who immediately left the room. I knew what was inside. The final batch of evidence linking Ethan to the illegal activity at Blake Industries. 10 minutes later, the story broke. Ethan turned white as cameras flashed. Sophia's face crumpled as the news spread through the room. Ethan was publicly disgraced, fired, investigated by federal authorities, ruined. I walked toward Ethan, heels clicking on marble. He met my gaze, his eyes filled with disbelief and betrayal. "You did this," he whispered. I leaned in, brushing my lips against his ear. "Yes," I whispered. "And I'm just getting started." Ethan and Sophia had made a mistake. They thought they could betray me and walk away untouched. Now they were bleeding. And the best part? I wasn't done yet. The fallout from Ethan's public disgrace was swift and brutal. Blake Industries' stock value was in free fall. Within 24 hours, the company's board forced Ethan's father to resign. Ethan himself had been barred from entering the company's headquarters. A public statement was issued announcing that Ethan was under internal investigation for misconduct. Federal authorities were already circling and the media was tearing him apart. It was exactly what I wanted. But I wasn't finished. Destroying his career was satisfying, but I wanted more. I wanted him humiliated, broken, left standing in the ruins of his life with nowhere to turn. Sophia, meanwhile, was unraveling just as quickly. Her social media accounts were flooded with hate comments about her involvement in Ethan's downfall. The leaked photos of her drunken nights and questionable behavior had destroyed her professional credibility. Her PR firm put her on indefinite leave. She was rapidly becoming a social pariah. But even after everything, Sophia and Ethan were still clinging to each other, trauma bonding through the wreckage I had created. Ethan was protective of Sophia, shielding her from the media, standing by her side even as their reputations crumbled. It almost would have been admirable, if it wasn't so pathetic. And that's when I knew exactly how to deliver the final blow. I was going to make Ethan fall in love with me again. And then I was going to destroy him. Julian helped me orchestrate the perfect opportunity. Blake Industries had suffered so much damage that the business world was treating it like a dying animal. Julian had already positioned his company to buy out their remaining assets. But there was one sticking point. Ethan still owned a percentage of Blake Industries stock. Julian wanted it. And he needed me to convince Ethan to sell. "Are you sure you want to handle this part yourself?" Julian asked as we sat together at a high-end cocktail bar. He was nursing a glass of whiskey, his dark eyes assessing me carefully. "I could pressure him legally. He'll cave eventually." I smiled, tracing the rim of my glass with one finger. "No. I want to see him suffer up close." Julian's mouth curled into that dangerous smile I was beginning to enjoy. "You're colder than I thought, Isabella. You have no idea." Julian set the plan in motion. He made sure Ethan received an exclusive invitation to a high-profile charity gala. A seat next to Julian's table, to be precise. Of course, Julian would be bringing me as his date. I wore a blood-red satin dress with a plunging neckline and a slit that showed just enough thigh to make men lose their composure. My hair was pinned back, leaving my neck bare. I knew exactly how to weaponize my body. I had done it with Ethan before. I was going to do it again. When we walked into the gala, all eyes turned toward us. Julian's hand rested low on my back as we crossed the room, guiding me toward our table. I felt Ethan's eyes on me before I even saw him. He was sitting at the table next to us, nursing a glass of scotch. He looked different, thinner, harder. His jawline was sharper, his eyes darker. His black suit was tailored to perfection, but the tension in his shoulders gave away how tightly wound he was. I smiled at him across the room, a slow, dangerous smile. His eyes narrowed. "Isabella," he said tightly when we reached his table. "Ethan," I replied, settling into my seat next to Julian. Ethan's eyes flicked toward Julian, cold, calculating. "Didn't think this was your scene, Blackwood." Julian smirked. "I'm adaptable." His hand slid possessively over my thigh beneath the table. Ethan's jaw flexed. His eyes burned into me. "Good." Julian leaned toward me, his mouth brushing against my ear. "He's watching you like he wants to kill me." "Let him." I smiled, sipping my champagne. The evening passed in a blur of polite conversations and strategic power plays. But I could feel Ethan's eyes on me the entire time. The tension between us was palpable, the kind of magnetic pull that could only be created by years of unresolved pain and betrayal. Toward the end of the night, I excused myself to the ladies' room. When I stepped into the hallway, I wasn't surprised to hear footsteps behind me. "Ethan." I turned. He was standing at the end of the hallway, his tie loosened, his eyes dark with anger and something else. "You're playing a dangerous game," he said softly. I smiled. "Am I?" He stalked toward me until he was close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off his body. "You're with Julian now?" he said, his voice low. I raised an eyebrow. "Why do you care?" His jaw tightened. "Because I know you, Isabella. You don't do things unless there's a reason. Maybe the reason is that Julian knows how to satisfy me in ways you never could." His eyes flashed dangerously. "Don't test me." "Or what?" I whispered. He moved closer until my back hit the wall. His hand braced against the marble next to my head, caging me in. His breath was hot against my neck. "I never stopped wanting you," he said darkly. My breath hitched, but I kept my face calm. "You wanted Sophia more though, didn't you?" A muscle jumped in his jaw. "I made a mistake," he admitted. His hand brushed against my bare arm and I shivered despite myself. "I should have chosen you." "Too late for regrets," I said coldly. He leaned in, his mouth inches from mine. "What if it's not too late?" I smiled, running my hand slowly down the length of his tie. "Poor Ethan. You really think I'd let you have me after what you did?" I pushed him away and walked back into the ballroom, leaving him standing in the hallway, breathless and furious. 2 nights later he showed up at my apartment. It was late. A knock at the door startled me awake. I opened it, still wearing the silk slip I had gone to bed in, and there he was. "I need to talk to you," he said. His eyes were glassy from drinking. I stepped aside and let him in. I poured him a glass of whiskey and handed it to him. He downed it quickly. I poured him another. "I want to fix this," Ethan said, his voice slurred. I sat next to him on the couch. My hand slid along his thigh. "You can't fix it." He shuddered beneath my touch. His gaze dropped to my mouth. "Why are you doing this?" I leaned in, my lips brushing against his ear. "Because you owe me." His breathing hitched. His hand curled around my waist, dragging me closer. His mouth found mine, desperate, rough, the way it used to be when we were still in love. And I let him kiss me. I let him drown in me. My hands slid beneath his shirt, nails dragging along his back. He groaned into my mouth, his hands clutching at me like he was starving. "Isabella," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I love you." I smiled against his mouth. I reached behind me, pulled a folder from the coffee table and set it on his lap. "What's this?" he murmured, breathless. "Just some paperwork." He didn't even look at it. He grabbed the pen I offered and signed the pages, eyes still locked on mine. The moment the ink hit the paper, I pulled away. The next morning, Julian called me. "Ethan signed the papers," he said. "Blake Industries is finished." I smiled. One more step left. Sophia was about to fall, and when she did, Ethan was going to crumble with her. Because once you start destroying someone, you don't stop until there's nothing left. Ethan didn't take the betrayal well. Of course he wouldn't. Men like Ethan, powerful, entitled, weren't used to losing. He was the golden boy of Blake Industries, the heir to a financial empire, the man who had everything handed to him on a silver platter. He had been adored, respected, worshipped even. And now, in the span of a month, he had lost his career, his fortune, and his reputation. And it was all because of me. After he signed the papers, Julian finalized the acquisition of Blake Industries' remaining assets within 48 hours. Julian's company officially took control, absorbing what was left of Ethan's family legacy. Blake Industries ceased to exist as an independent entity. It was now a footnote under the Blackwood Holdings umbrella, a forgotten empire. Ethan's father publicly disowned him. He gave an exclusive interview to Forbes, calling Ethan reckless and irresponsible, blaming him for the destruction of the company. Ethan didn't even have the money to cushion his fall. His personal accounts were frozen due to the federal investigation into his financial misconduct. His properties, including the penthouse where we used to live together, were seized as collateral for unpaid debts. He was finished. And Sophia? Sophia was unraveling just as quickly. After the leaked photos and rumors about her personal life, her career in PR was over. Her firm fired her quietly, trying to avoid further public humiliation. Her reputation as the perfect Blake fiancée was destroyed. The media had turned against her. People were calling her the reason behind Ethan's downfall, painting her as a manipulative social climber. It was deliciously poetic. But despite everything, despite the fact that I had destroyed both of them, Ethan and Sophia were still clinging to each other. It was pathetic. And that's why I knew I wasn't done yet. I saw Ethan again 2 weeks after the takeover. Julian and I were attending a high-profile corporate event, a celebration of the acquisition. The venue was a sleek, glass-walled rooftop overlooking the city skyline. The guest list was exclusive: CEOs, financiers, and socialites. Julian was dressed in a tailored black suit, his dark hair swept back, his hand resting casually on my hip. We were the center of attention. People whispered about us, about how I had left Ethan for Julian, about how Ethan had lost everything while I was thriving on the arm of his greatest enemy. Julian leaned down, his mouth grazing my ear. Ethan just walked in. My pulse spiked, but I didn't let it show. I turned casually, following Julian's gaze. Ethan was standing at the entrance, looking dangerous in a dark suit. He was thinner than the last time I'd seen him, his sharp cheekbones cutting like knives beneath his skin. His eyes were dark and dangerous, locked on me. He didn't look broken. He looked furious. Good. Ethan walked toward me with the kind of controlled tension that suggested violence beneath the surface. People watched as he approached, sensing the tension. "Isabella," Ethan said, his voice low and dark. "Ethan," I replied smoothly, offering him a cool smile. Julian's hand tightened on my waist. "Should you even be here, Blake?" "I'm not trespassing," Ethan said. His eyes never left mine. "I'm a guest." Julian's smile sharpened. "It's not your world anymore, Ethan. You don't belong here." Ethan ignored him. His gaze burned into me. "Can we talk?" I tilted my head. "Why would we need to talk?" "You know why." Julian started to intervene, but I placed a hand on his chest. "It's fine," I said softly. "I've got this." Julian hesitated before nodding and stepping back. Ethan's hand curled around my wrist as he led me to a quiet corner of the rooftop. He dropped his hand the second we were alone. "Why did you do it?" he said. His voice was cold, clipped. "You mean the stock transfer?" I smiled faintly. "I did what I had to do. You used me. You betrayed me first. I made a mistake, he hissed. I leaned back against the glass railing. And I corrected it. His jaw tightened. So that's it? You take everything from me and now you're with him? Julian treats me better than you ever did. His hand slammed into the railing beside my head. I didn't flinch. You think I'm going to let you walk away from this? Ethan growled. I think you don't have a choice. He leaned closer, his breath hot against my ear. You're playing with fire, Isabella. I smiled. And you're already burning. I had saved the final blow for Sophia. Public humiliation was one thing, but I wanted Sophia to suffer the way I had. I wanted her to feel the humiliation of losing everything she cared about. Sophia and Ethan had still been holding on to the last shred of their public image, appearing in the press together, claiming they were working through the scandal as a couple. They were trying to salvage what was left of their reputations by presenting themselves as a united front. It was time to shatter that illusion. I arranged for Sophia to receive an anonymous message, a set of photos showing Ethan and me together at the charity gala. The heated conversation in the hallway. The way Ethan had looked at me. The way my dress had slid dangerously low over my thigh. Sophia confronted Ethan the next morning, and Julian made sure the press was there to capture it. The video hit the internet within hours. Sophia standing in the middle of a crowded street, screaming at Ethan. You still love her, don't you? Ethan's face was stony. His mouth curled into a dangerous smile. You knew this was never real. Sophia's face crumpled. I gave up everything for you. You gave up nothing, Ethan said coldly. You were always just convenient. The crowd gasped. Sophia slapped him across the face. Cameras flashed. And just like that, they were done. Sophia fled the city the next day, boarding a private plane back to Europe. She was never seen in public again. And Ethan? He was truly alone now. Ethan showed up at my apartment 2 nights later. I opened the door to find him standing there looking hollow. You got what you wanted, he said. I did. You destroyed me. I smiled. I warned you. His eyes darkened. Was it worth it? I tilted my head. What do you think? He stepped closer, his hand brushing my cheek. I hate you. No, you don't. His mouth crashed against mine, angry and desperate. His hands slid into my hair, dragging me closer. My nails scraped against his chest as I kissed him back. For a moment, I let it happen. Let him taste me, let him drown in the storm he had created. Then I pushed him away. He stumbled back, breathing hard. You can't have me, I whispered. Not anymore. His jaw tightened. His hands curled into fists. You win, Isabella, he said darkly. I know. He stepped back toward the door. He hesitated, his gaze lingering on me. Goodbye, Ethan. He turned and left. And this time, I knew he wasn't coming back. A week later, Julian and I attended a gala hosted by Blackwood Holdings, the official announcement of the completion of the Blake Industries acquisition. Julian raised his glass toward me across the table. You did it. I smiled. We did it. What's next for you? I leaned toward him, my smile dark. Anything I want. Because I had taken everything from Ethan. His career. His reputation. His sister. And the best part? He would spend the rest of his life knowing that I was the one who destroyed him. And he'd never get the chance to make it right. Checkmate. The end.